consider myself financially literate, but I did decide to hire a financial advisor this year, and I wanted to walk through step by step everything that we've done with them since bringing them on in February. It's now August. I do think that we've gotten a lot of value from working with them, but I also think that you could do a lot of this on your own. And my hope is that by telling you what they've done for us so far, we'll give you some ideas on how you can make your retirement plan more bulletproof and help you feel more financially on track. So the very first thing that they did was they had us connect all of our bank accounts to a budgeting app called Monarch, which they partner with, so we did get this service for free. I have built my own free budgeting app, which you can totally use, but I will admit that Monarch is significantly better. So I put a link to both my app and Monarch in the description so you can see for yourself. And once these were connected, they basically looked back over the course of 6 months to review all of our spending each month. And they basically use that to figure out what we spend on an average month. And that's because if they just looked at 1 month, they might miss things like cart maintenance and other bills that only come up every few months. And they basically categorize all of our expenses into 7 main categories. And those categories were just housing, transportation, utilities, food, kids, health, and shopping and entertainment. This was actually really helpful for us to understand, which of these expenses was consuming the most amount of money and how those fluctuated over time. And it helped us understand that on average, we spend $13,459 on a month, of which about $2,500 of that was just on kids and about $1,600 of that was just giving. Figuring all this out is incredibly important because it actually factors into the future. Figuring all this out is incredibly important because it actually factors into everything else I'm about to get into. And so I would recommend actually just using these same exact categories, looking at the last 6 months and figuring out what your average spending is month over month. And maybe you'll even find some ways that you could be saving money along the way. But I just want to be clear that the goal of doing this isn't purely to be saving money. It's actually to do things like retirement planning, how much you should be investing, et cetera, et cetera. And surprisingly enough, there's actually some really helpful insights that came out of this. And for us, that was looking at our checking accounts, our savings accounts, our retirement accounts, the real estate that we owned, as well as our taxable brokerage account. And then they actually reviewed all of our accounts to see where all of our money is. For you, this might just all be in your checking. Then they reviewed all of our accounts and looked at where our money was. So for starters, we had $30,000 sitting in our checking account, and they recommended that we basically cut this down to $15,000, basically to reflect what we're spending on a monthly basis. Now, as far as savings goes, we actually had 2 accounts. The first one was an emergency fund that has $60,000 in it, and they actually recommended that we move this down to 3 months expenses. And so they had us actually move some money around to make this $45,000. Now, the second account is money that we're saving up for a dream home. And so what they actually had us do is take the $15,000 from the checking account, move that into there, and the $15,000 from the emergency fund and move that into that account as well. Then they reviewed our retirement accounts. And the main insight that came out of that part was just opening up a solo 401k for my wife who's self-employed. And I didn't even actually know that was a thing. Additionally, because we make too much to convert to our Roth IRA, they had us focus on doing Roth conversions, specifically focusing on just the principal, not any of the gains. And they actually had us take the gains and move it into each of our 401ks. I guess if you leave your gains in the traditional IRA and don't actually do anything with it, then you can face some tax implications later on. And so they're really adamant about moving the remaining money into a 401k. Now, if you were starting from a blank slate, this is probably what they would roughly tell you. They would say, hey, make sure you only have 1 month in your checking account. Make sure that you have only 3 months in your savings account. And then money that's coming in, put into a Roth, unless you make too much, then put into a traditional IRA and do like we're doing and do conversions into the Roth account. If you make enough to max out that Roth account, then start focusing on your 401k. And if you still have money left over, invest into an HSA. And if you still have money left over after that, because all of these have contribution limits, then they would say start investing into a taxable brokerage account. Once you finish doing all that, it's going to give you some insight into what your net worth is, and it's also going to help you understand how much that you need to retire. And it's going to give you some insight into how much that you actually need to retire. So just to be completely transparent with you, we have $715,000 invested across those accounts. As I mentioned, we have $45,000 saved in an emergency fund, $15,000 in the checking. Our total equity, because we also have a rental property, is $450K, and then we have $180,000 now saved for this dream home after moving some of that money around. Altogether, that's about $1.4 million. Now, once they figure that out, then they start to say, well, how much retirement income do you actually need? They take a more conservative approach. They actually said that we need about $150,000 per year to live off of during retirement. We have to keep in mind that we have a $3,000 mortgage and we spend $2,500 on childcare. So those expenses would be dropped. Dropping both of those reduces our expenses to $8,000 a month. So again, I think that $150,000 is a bit conservative. But again, they use $150,000. Then they multiply that number by 25 to figure out what your retirement number is. This is based on a 4% drawdown, meaning that you live off of 4% of all of your retirement during retirement. But if I'm being honest, my plan is to use 5%. And that's just because the person that originally came up with the 4% rule recently came out saying that he was wrong and that it should be 4.7%. And that's, again, if the market were to just completely collapse the first day that you're retired. So I'm going to be quote unquote a little bit more risky and use 5% instead. Now, when coming up with a plan of how much more that we need to be saving and investing every single month, they actually don't use this number. Instead, they use how much money that we actually have invested today. And that's because after a discussion, we had talked to them about how we do plan to sell our rental over the next few years once we do find this dream home. And so they didn't want to factor the rental income into our retirement income. And they didn't really want to use this because it sounded like these numbers would be fluctuating pretty soon. And also, a paid off home contributes to your net worth, but it doesn't actually count towards retirement savings. Now, right now I'm 34 and my wife's 39. And so what they said was, hey, you have 26 years left of compound growth on your existing retirement money before you would actually use them. Now, as far as a compound rate, they use 6%, which again, I think is pretty conservative. The market grows on average at 11%. And so even if you factored 3%, which is the average inflation, then you could still potentially use 8%. I think it'd be more reasonable to use 7%. But using 6%, that $715,000 would actually grow to $3.389 million after 26 years. But what this did end up causing is for me to quit my W-2 job, which means that technically we've hit coast fire and we don't actually have to invest any more money. But we're going to continue to keep investing because we would like to drop this down to like 15 years. And me quitting my W-2 is actually the main reason that we wanted to hire a financial advisor, because neither my wife and I are on a W-2. We're both solo entrepreneurs, which means that our salary kind of fluctuates like this because our businesses are actually similar enough that we can roll them up into the same S Corp. And so to eliminate this fluctuation, one of the recommendations that they made was to actually turn our business into an S Corp. Now with the S Corp, we basically set a salary that we each get from the business. And then on top of that, we also take monthly distributions, which basically just provide a bunch of additional tax benefits that I'm honestly not smart enough to teach you about. But I just know this helps us reduce our taxes and it makes it so that our income is actually consistent month over month, which is a lot easier for retirement planning. And so because we know how much our monthly expenses are, we've actually set this up to be $15,000 a month. And the crazy thing is that if we can get here, that by 50, we'd actually get to 3.4 million, our retirement number. And then on top of that, we actually have more money going to my wife's solo 401k. And the advantage here is that she can contribute to that, but also the employer can match that 100%, and all of that is tax deductible. And this is actually the only money that we're investing right now. It's $5,000 a month that we're investing. And in 10 years, that'll get our retirement savings to 2.4 million, not to mention it's gonna save us a ton of money on taxes. Now, as far as setting up our actual investments, I recently made a video where I walked through everything that our $715,000 invested in, so you should definitely go check that out. But the big recommendations that they made were for us to start building positions in VXUS, VB, VO, this is an international, this is small cap, and this is a mid cap index fund, as well as continue to invest in the QQQ and VU. And that's just because currently we have so much of our investments already in QQQ and VU. That's just because right now we already have so much invested in both of these index funds. But even they admitted that if we just entirely invested in VU, we'd probably still be completely fine. And so if you're wondering what a financial advisor would tell you to invest in, if you have a completely blank slate, it would basically be focusing on these three index funds initially, and then sprinkling in a little bit of these as you build out your portfolio. Additionally, they recommended another fund that I'll toss in here called VTI, which is basically just a total market index fund. But honestly, I do not think that this should be why you sign up for a financial advisor. I think this is very, very easy to do on your own, and there's so many free resources out there for this. So it's been 6 months, and this is literally everything that we've done with them so far. And it might not seem like much, so let me give you some reasons why it might feel that way. So first off, we had a lot of things already in place. For example, an estate plan. If we didn't have that in place, that would have been one of the first things that they had also done with us. And also, we have no debt right now. If we did have debt, they probably would have had us focusing on a plan to eliminate that debt first. And lastly, while I do value working with them, it is work that I have to also do after they make some of these recommendations. And I don't always have a ton of time to go dedicate to taking on more financial projects. Like I probably could do a lot more, but at a certain point, there's not that much additional value that you get from tweaking things. And so if you're on the fence, my final recommendation would really be, if you have a complicated financial situation, like you're not standard W-2, you have a lot of different investments that you've already made, or you're about to retire, I think those might be good reasons to consider signing up for a financial advisor. But I think for most people who have a very basic financial plan, you could probably just do a lot of this and get yourself 90% of the way there. Additionally, I make a ton of free resources beyond just this video. I have a free personal finance course. I have a free weekly newsletter to give more types of updates based on things that are happening in the market. And also I have a free budgeting app like I mentioned earlier. So I would definitely use all those resources first before maybe going and spending hundreds or thousands of dollars with a financial advisor.